You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for this.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
You need a breach? What do you need?
Need one.
I don't know.
What's whole bed money?
Oh.
Thank you.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The theme of our discussion is how we survived the counterinsurgency. Chairman Omali Yeshitela will be joined by African Socialist International Secretary General Loezi Kinshasa, who is live right now in London with a viewing party/event. So he will be joining us to discuss this question, and we'll read from the book Vanguard, the Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution, Chapter 3, which deals with the party surviving the counterinsurgency war initiated against the Black Revolution of the 1960s. This discussion is extremely timely as we build the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa campaign in defense of the African Revolution following the FBI attacks against our movement on July 29th of this year. To kick this study off, we will receive our overview from Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa. So Uhuru, SG, I stand corrected. So as I mentioned, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa is in the process of pulling together an event right now, a viewing party happening in London, the UK, the not so United Kingdom. And so I'm sure that that's taking up some time right now. So we're going to go ahead and get into this overview, and I'm going to go ahead and take it away. So can we get the overview up, please? All right. Give me one second. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So how we survived the counterinsurgency. So first want to recognize and salute the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who after the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 1960s, well, as a part of that movement in the 1960s, in fact, initiated the first act of Black power in this country by tearing down a mural that hung right here in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, that depicted Africans in this white nationalist caricature, tore this mural down as a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and dragged it through the streets of St. Pete. And as a result, was thrown into prison. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela did not let the constant assassinations, imprisonment, the intimidation, and the attacks by the U.S. government against our movement to deter him from the struggle. And thus he went forward. He developed the junta militant organizations that would come together as one of the organizations that would come together to form the African People's Socialist Party in 1972. And he recognized that the African working class needed a revolutionary political party, a vehicle in order to wage this revolutionary struggle. And through this process also summed up the fundamental contradiction facing African and the world's people. And through this form developed the theory of African internationalism that would explain the world from this point of view, from the eyes of the colonized, the subjects, the pedestal of this entire economic system that was birthed through our enslavement, through our colonial capture. So that is African internationalism, and that was developed by the chairman, the theory of the African working class that was recognized as being able to paint the way forward towards our future. So I want to salute the brilliance of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the steadfast, relentless leadership of the chairman in this process. And it looks like Secretary General Luwezi is joining, so I'll turn it over to him as soon as his stuff gets connected. Uhuru, SG. Oh, okay. All right, we can go forward. And also want to salute the 50 years of relentless history.
Whoa. Can you hear me?
Uhuru, SG, yes, we can hear you.
Uhuru, Director Kile.
Uhuru. So I let the people know that you are engaged in an event right there in London. And so I started the overview, but if you are able to take it away at this point, we're just at this slide saluting the 50 years of relentless history of the African People's Socialist Party. So I can turn it over to you, SG, if you are ready.
Well, Director Kile, thank you so much for the privilege to be invited in this session of Omali Taught Me. And I just want to use the opportunity to salute our leader, the leader of African Revolution of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Without his work, relentless work, we won't be able to do the work we're doing right now. Now, what we're doing today is just, I have really no words to say. What we're doing today is just profound theory of African internationalism or Yeshitelism. That's what we're doing today. So you have seen already some of the slides. And I just want to let you know that in the 1960s, as you can see, the revolution was the main trend in the world. When you talk about the 60s, you must talk about the revolution. That was the main trend. The highest expression of culture for colonized people was revolution, to be free. And the response of the United States government, not just the U.S. government, even the picture you're looking at, you see the Africans being contained by the British soldiers in Kenya. That's a famous picture. This is a counterinsurgency. And counterinsurgency is something the chairman was the first one to do to sum up for African people around the world to explain the defeat of the 60s, what happened to us to the 60s, what happened to the excitement of the 60s, what happened to Lumumba, what happened to Malcolm X, what happened to Kwame Nkrumah, what happened to the Panthers, what happened to Jomo, what happened to Che Guevara. Chairman was able to tell us what you're looking at is a counterinsurgency that crushed our movement. Or the African People's Socialist Party was created in 1972 in the face of this counterinsurgency. When there was no more Malcolm X or the Panthers or Kwame Nkrumah, that's when this party was born. It was born in a historical time. It was born when there was no revolutionaries in the black world anymore. It was born when the critical questions in the black liberation movement were not resolved. The African workers did not have their own organization. That's when the chairman came with the African People's Socialist Party. It's a historical moment that the workers in the United States have responded that we need our own organization, we need our own party of workers to promote our own selfish interests. So that's historical. Or our party solved the problems left to us from the defeat of the African Revolution of the 60s. We have to remember that we are part of a national liberation movement, which means the whole nation, all black people, the workers, the peasants, including the African petty bourgeoisie, we all oppressed. But in the 60s, the African petty bourgeoisie collaborated with our oppressors to confiscate our struggle for liberation. So the revolution was crushed. And the questions like, who's going to lead our struggle? Who is the social force that cannot betray the revolution? We didn't answer that question. What is our philosophy to plan our freedom, to guide our freedom? We didn't resolve that question. What type of organization do we need? What relationship we need with the world, with other colonized people, with white people, and so on? And Chairman came by creating the African People's Party. He was on a path to solve all these questions. Or the party developed African Internationalism, a theory or practice. You know, you can't be a scientist just saying you're going to build a rocket, you're going to do this. You must build a rocket to see if your theory works. So African Internationalism is not just a theory to say we're going to do this, we're going to change the world, we're going to fight for black power, we're going to unite Africa. But how are you going to do it? You know, and so practice is key. Practice must verify, must test your theory. Otherwise, it's just, it's just theory, just ideas. So it's a theory of practice. African Internationalism is a theory of practice. Or African Internationalism is the worldview of the African working class. And this was a big demonstration in London. You see some of our comrades holding that banner. It's one of the most popular banners of the party. So we put worldview for African working class everywhere we go. African Internationalism everywhere. There is an event of significance, we are there, so we can speak for ourselves as a class of African workers, colonized African working class. So we see everything from that perspective. We understood that colonial capitalism is built on the assault on Africa, the stolen labor of African people. And this is critical to understand anything. When you see capitalism, when you see it in many forms, from Bill Gates with his company, or Ford his cars, or Samsung in Korea, wherever. When you say capitalism, you have to understand its genesis, where it began. It began on the assault on Africa. That's what every African should understand and should fight to get the whole world to understand it. We defined colonialism as a mode of production. This is a groundbreaking statement. It's not just a statement, it's a groundbreaking statement. It is one of our defining moments in history, because nobody ever said colonialism is a mode of production. Nobody. Only chairman came with that conclusion that colonialism is a mode of production, which means that capitalism depends on colonialism being the mode of production. And that is profound, which means, as we said in the slide early, it began on the attack on African people, on the attack on Africa. And if you understand this, then you are in a place to understand everything is going on everywhere. The centrality of African people around the world. Or African people inside the US and around the world face colonialism, no racism. And our chairman here defeated the explanation of racism. It does not make sense that you should be fighting against racism when we already said we're talking about mode of production. Racism is not a mode of production. It's just a set of ideas in the heads of white people. But the key thing is everything depends on colonialism, including racism. Everything depends on colonialism. So we should fight to end colonialism, not to waste our time on fighting against racism, because our historical mission is to end colonialism as a mode of production. And this way we know we're fighting for power. We're fighting to bring a new world, and everybody has to have a different relationship with black people, because we want to end colonialism as a starting point, as a mode of production. We bear the brunt of colonial states. This is Brother Walter Scott running away, being shot cowardly by the U.S. police on the back. I think South Carolina police, I think it was. And that's colonialism. In the real world, it means shooting black people, killing black people, or harming black people, so they can maintain colonialism as a mode of production. That's why all these attacks are happening against us. Like any colonized people around the world, when we rise up, we face counterinsurgency. And that's really important to understand, that every time we're fighting back, the response of the colonizers, of the white bourgeoisie, imperialist bourgeoisie, is to launch a counteroffensive, which is a counterinsurgency, to deny us ability to negate colonialism. It's a war against the colonized people. That's really important. One of the best known counterinsurgency fronts inside the US was COINTELPRO, led by the FBI. I must say quickly, we doing this study, there are documents you can read from the Burning Spear newspaper or the burningspear.com website, Chairman Omali and the African People's Socialist Party versus the counterinsurgency. Chairman Omali and the African People's Socialist Party versus the counterinsurgency. It's in the burningspear.com. I recommend everyone to get that article. It will enrich, it will add to everything we're saying here on the counterinsurgency. So one of the best known counterinsurgency fronts inside the US was COINTELPRO, led by the FBI. COINTELPRO recognized the Black Panther Party as the greatest threat to internal security of the US. I'll read that again. COINTELPRO recognized the Black Panther Party as the greatest threat to internal security of the US. That's just fundamental. They didn't say, the Green Party, they didn't say the Tea Party, or they didn't say anything like that. They say the Black Panther Party, the organization of the colonized African working class. So basically, it's a way of recognizing the colonial mode of production. That's what this relationship represents. COINTELPRO objectives: prevents the coalition of militant black nationalist groups. They're talking about Africans, colonized African working class, and the oppressed African colonized people want to be free. Point B, prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the movement. They're talking about the leadership capable to unite black people, like Garvey, like Malcolm X, like Chairman. That's what they're talking about. Prevent violence on the part of black nationalist movements. Point D, prevent black nationalist leaders and groups from gaining respectability. Prevent the long-range growth of militant black nationalist organizations, especially among the youth. So basically, they don't want organizations like ours to be attractive, to become popular amongst young people, so we can have new cadres amongst the young African working class around the African nation. That's what they're talking about. COINTELPRO assassinated African leaders in the US and Africa. You remember the great Malcolm X, the great Lumumba. They were killed to stop the revolution from developing. They killed to stop the masses from uniting totally, completely with the leadership of Malcolm X and Patrice Lumumba. To stop the revolution, that's what they did. But today we are here to say they failed, because the African People's Socialist Party is on the course to complete the Black Revolution. COINTELPRO attacked Pamphlet's offices. As you can see, the attack on the 29th of July, attack on the offices of the African People's Socialist Party. You can see it's no news, a continuity of COINTELPRO. You can see that's what they did to the Panther. They attacked their offices and things like that. COINTELPRO locked up African people, political prisoners. As we're talking right now, we have all these great comrades, freedom fighters, who are being locked up for some of them more than 40 years. Can you just imagine fighting for freedom and you end up in jail for fighting for, And we need to organize everywhere so we can complete the Black Revolution and free them all. That should be a demand from everywhere, from South Africa to US, from Jamaica to Europe, everywhere. All these prisoners should be known to all black community, and we should demand the immediate release. Or COINTELPRO destroyed organization. They wrote all kind of letters setting organization against each other, setting leaders in the same organization against each other, and things like that. And that's why the summation. Remember what I said? Chairman Omali has been the only one to sum up that what happened to us was COINTELPRO, and it's happening now. COINTELPRO crushed revolutionary ideas. And remember, the colonizers, they don't want a revolution. They know a successful revolution led by the African working class, like the African People's Socialist Party, means the end of colonialism as a mode of production. They are well aware of that. So that's why they attacked our movement, because what we represent, the foundation of the whole edifice, the foundation, that's really significant for us to be all the time aware of that, our own significance, because the enemy is aware of that. And the African People's Socialist Party represent the re-emergence, the growth of war of ideas, to complete the revolution, and we can't be defeated. The party is the only force inside the U.S. that summed up the counterinsurgency, as I said many times. This is no small thing. Most of us, we never heard of a counterinsurgency, and those who heard about it did not have they couldn't put it in context like the chairman did. And this is just an ongoing, groundbreaking contribution the chairman has made and continue to make to advance this revolution. That's really critical. Or neocolonialism is also counterinsurgency too. You go now white power in the black face. Everywhere, black people celebrate so-called independence in the Caribbean and Africa. In the U.S., we have black officials, mayors and general in armies and head of Africa. These are black guys, generals and so on. But as Chairman said, they are not our generals. They are not our president. They're not our governments. These are the governments for the colonizers and the collaborators of the African people bourgeoisie. We need our own government. And our government has to be a united government from south to north, from east to west Africa. one united single government led by the African working class. That's what we need. Or drugs and the drug economy. How many times we watch it, movies, the news, you see black people with drugs, but nobody ever summed it up for us. That was a drug economy, and it was a part of the counterinsurgency to destroy not just that they've already killed the leaders, but to destroy the basis that create the leaders. Remember, the leaders come from the people. That's where the leaders come from. So the United States government decided to attack the working class at its foundation to make sure we are incapable to bring back another revolutionary movement. Of course, that failed because the revolution is coming back. And the drug economy, as you know, represents something like at $500 billion, a hell of money. We don't have that money because the media wants you to believe that our kids, young people in the black community in England, the US, and France control the drug economy. No, we don't. The colonizers control the drug economy. Or mass imprisonment, all part of counterinsurgency. Instead of making the revolution, we are in jail. You can't make a revolution in jails, you see. And also the jail itself is also a place to create more value for the colonizers. It's a population control. In fact, counterinsurgency is about resources control, population control. That's what counterinsurgency is about, to make sure we don't have access to resource. We need to create life for ourselves, but most important, to make sure we don't have the necessary organization and leadership to complete the black revolution. Or even before the 60s, the U.S. government attacked the movement of Marcus Garvey. Remember, those who listened to Chairman recently, he talked about the first integration in the FBI, happened in the attack against Garvey. They recruited the African in the FBI to facilitate the attack on Marcus Garvey. That's part of counterinsurgency too. And in fact, Edgar Hoover got his job in attacking Marcus Garvey. Where the FBI was built, and J. Edgar Hoover got his job based on the attack on the Garvey movement. As you can see, the FBI a secret organization to attack to attack the revolution. That's what some people refer to political secret service. That's what they do. It's one of the arm of the United States state apparatus to attack the struggles of the colonized people. Or after 5 years of surveillance, the FBI manufactured the charge of mail fraud against Garvey. We have to understand that the governments, the United States government, and the rest of the colonizers' government, France, England, Germany, all of them, they can manufacture anything just to justify what they're doing. Just like now, they try to say we're being manipulated by Russians and things like that. Our struggle is over 600 years old. It's the oldest liberation movement. Of course, it's insulting to hear things like that. So that's what they do. That's why we need to organize. We need to mobilize the masses, because everything has to be won on a battlefield. Basically, the masses have to be part of the struggle, massive struggle, to stop everything they're doing. And Garvey was imprisoned, and this broke the back of Garvey movement. We need leadership for us to go forward. And during that time, the leadership also meant you need to have cadres, a multitude of cadres capable to carry out the vision laid out by the main leadership that was Garvey at the time. And that's why this meeting we're doing is important. That's why this study is important, because African liberation needs thousands and thousands of cadres, so we can go everywhere and complete the revolution regardless of what's happening to 1 or 2 or 10 or cadres, like the Vietnamese people. We need thousands and thousands and thousands of cadres everywhere. In the 1940s and 50s, Paul Robeson was labeled a Russian agent after visiting the Soviet Union. And he was forced to testify at the House and an American committee, and his passport was taken from him. And we are the colonized people, and we are the ones being punished for fighting to be free. It should be the opposite. The colonized should go to jail for stealing our freedom for so long, for colonizing us for so long. So, and that's why the struggle to win international support is also important, that the whole world is aware that our cause is just. We are the oppressed, we are the colonized, and white power, the white ruling class, the United States ruling class, and the rest of nature ruling class, they are the oppressors. You know, they are the oppressors. Or in 1951, W.E.B. Du Bois was indicted, arrested, and arraigned by the U.S. with the charge of being a Russian agent after he put out a petition against nuclear weapons, and he was 83, because he was a colonized, despite the fact that he united with the colonizers to bring down the wonderful movement of Marcus Garvey. But nevertheless, as a colonized, the colonizers have power over him, as they continue to do over us. That's why we're organizing to have our own power, to negate, to end the power of the oppressors over 1.5 billion of African people dispersed around the world. After release, Du Bois went to Ghana, where the U.S. took away his passport, and he died, as most of you know, in Ghana in 1963. Kwame Nkrumah was still in power. He will lose power because the U.S. coup 3 years later. In 1989, after the assassination of Hugh Newton in Auckland, the party laid his wake and funeral and overturned the media attacks on Newton. So the U.S. government wants to kill Hugh P. Newton twice. They assassinated him, but they also want to kill him politically. And they couldn't do that. It was our party, the African People's Socialist Party, led by Chairman Omali, that led the defense of Newton. So he was buried with honor that he deserved as a leader of the Black Panther Party that led, historical revolutionary movement. As I said earlier on, the FBI recognized that as the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. So the African People's Socialist Party defended and protected that legacy. The party, 50 years, relentless, the Vanguard, we have to realize one thing. 50 years, it might seem not a lot to some people, but in terms of achievement, groundbreaking, what Chairman Omali has been able to do is fundamentals. What we couldn't solve in South Africa, what we couldn't solve in the Congo, in Cameroon, in the US, in France, in Jamaica, all the unresolved questions, like the question of theory. What is your theory? What is your theory to guide your struggle? Are you going to borrow, or are you going to have your own theory to explain your own reality and to lay the path everyone has to follow? Where are you going to get that from? And Chairman Omali resolved that question. And what organization are you going to put in place to implement that theory? He resolved that question. This is not a small thing, because it never happened before. And those who did that will respond to those kind of questions. You have Mao, you have Lenin, possibly Ho Chi Minh, and they are successful. You can see China today and Russia today. And we're on that path to complete the Black Revolution, so that Africa and the Black nation can be successful again. One significant problem solved by the party is what to do with the white people. You remember? I remember being in London, full of black people in a meeting, only white person comes, and then the meeting is over. It should not be that white person should be in a meeting. I didn't even know at the time Chairman solved the question already. The role of white people, because they are part of the world. They are children of the colonizers, but what is their role? And the Chairman defined it. They have to work under the leadership of our party, and they have to do solidarity work. If you want to be part of a class struggle, you would do it under the leadership of the African working class. That's what Chairman referred to, that the class question is concentrated in the colonial question. So we solved that question of white people. Now we know what's the role of white people is everywhere on the planet. We know that. The party has always fought for the total liberation for unification of Africa. Until I met Chairman Omali, I only read Garvey and Nkrumah and others, but I never met anybody who is prepared to go anywhere to organize black people to complete the black revolution, but to unite. That's what it means. Complete the black revolution means unite Africa and the black nation under the leadership of the black working class. I don't know anyone who works like that, who had a vision like that. Go come to France, come to England, go to South Africa, go to Sierra Leone, travel everywhere. And it's just profound, really profound. So it's just profound. Well, that's why today we have our party in South Africa. You recognize our dynamic young leaders, great comrades in Africa. The chairman, Tafari, on your right, and Comrade Asa, who is in the middle, and I'm not sure about the name of the other comrade, but these are the folks leading the work in South Africa. Oh, comrades. Black Power Province and 50 institutions that negate the colonial economy. If you're looking for a genuine minister of economy for black people, don't look that far. DC Deputy Chair Onazene Yeshitela, she is the only minister presiding over the economic interests of the poor, colonized African working class, putting in practice the vision of Chairman Omali Stella. Black Power Blueprint and 50 institutions. That's incredible. Can you just imagine? The African working class has its own institution trying to negate the colonial economy. We have our own one market, one African nation, one market. We have our own bakery cafe. We have all kind of products we're making ourselves, so we can sell to ourselves and sell to everybody. We're transforming wherever we go. And Saint Louis, our United chairman, go to Saint Louis and you can see how Saint Louis was transformed. It's being transformed. It's not finished yet. It's an ongoing process. The U.S. declares 3 main enemies. And this is really important for everyone who is listening. The United States government has identified 3 main enemies. Russia, all of you know that. China, all of you know that. But the third one, what is the third one? The third one is Africa, our Africa. And African people means you and me. Because you have to understand the origin, the foundation of this world economy is in Africa. That's where it began. That's where the colonialism as a mode of production began. You have to be aware of that. That's where everybody's rushing to now to solve their own problems. So the United States understand that. Should Africa be united? Should the African People's Socialist Party succeed in uniting black people through this revolution that we're building with you, then colonialism as a mode of production will come down. They understand it. And you too should understand it. That's why we have to work harder to consolidate the party, consolidate the leadership of chairman everywhere, so we can complete the black revolution. This is the context for the FBI attacks on the party. It's really, really significant, important to understand it. The attack from the FBI on our party, on our leadership, is not happening just in a vacuum like that. Everything we said here is really the background for you to understand what's happening, why they're doing it. They're doing it because we represent the future for Africa. They're doing it because the colonial mode of production was born in Africa and dependent on Africa. They're doing it because we're being successful. More and more Africans around the world are recognizing Chairman Omali Shila and African Internationalism, the theory developed in organizations that's built as the vehicle to complete the black revolution and unify Africa, as Nkrumah wants it to do. Completing the work of Garvey, completing the work of Malcolm X, completing the work of the Panthers, of Lumumba, the Sobukwe. All these things are concentrated inside the African People's Socialist Party. We need to understand that. Or African resistance and the Vanguard Party is rising. Africa is on the rise. The African working class is on the rise. African internationalism is on the rise. Chairman Omali Shila is on the rise. That's what everyone should understand. That's why we're calling you to join straight away. Or African independence in our lifetime. This, in fact, is the title of our meeting today in London. African independence in our lifetime. We're not saying next generation will do it. We're not saying we're going to kick down the can. No, we're not kicking down the can for another generation to pick up the can. No, we Africans who are alive in our lifetime, in Chairman's lifetime, we want to complete the Black Revolution. That's how we understand the acceleration of history that's happening right now. Acceleration of history is happening right now. Be part of it so we can even bring more speed to that struggle to complete the Black Revolution. So I think this is the last slide. So thank you, Director Kelly and the Burning Spear team for the opportunity or privilege to be on this panel. And I apologize for the part we had in the beginning. That's all story to explain, but I just want to be self-critical to the people who are listening.
Uhuru SG. Well, we are building everywhere, including in the not so United Kingdom, and recognize that this is an important event that's happening there. So really want to salute and recognize you and the forces that are there helping to organize this event. And just want to really appreciate that overview that's opening up this entire discussion. And what's clear is that it has taken relentless struggle to bring our struggle to the place that it is today. The fact is that no simpering, no belly crawling or begging of the oppressor would have resulted in the same thing that we have experienced, the same moment in history that we're in. It would have resulted in the existence of the African People's Socialist Party, the theory of African internationalism. None of that, would have happened with any other type of struggle other than this relentless, this fierce political and ideological struggle to survive the counterinsurgency. And of course, we know Chairman Omali Yeshitela took all of this on. So just before we turn it over to the chairman and go through chapter 3 of Vanguard, how we survive the counterinsurgency, want to just break quickly here for some announcements, and then we'll deepen this discussion. So let's get into that section. I just want to let people know of what's upcoming and also how people can get involved and connect with some of the things that we're doing. So if we can go ahead and get those announcements up so we can continue on with our discussion. All right, so all right, we're getting to, okay. All right, so first and foremost, the Burning Spear newspaper presents a special online cultural event during its Black August campaign, which is going on right now through August 31st. The theme of this event is You Can't Jail the Revolution, Free 'Em All. And it will feature a panel discussion with myself, Agitprop Director Kilian Nai, Cadre Development Director Matsamela Odom, filmmaker Tylen Washington, and cultural performances from LA-based Honey Blue, UMSO, located in Germany, Complex, and more, honoring our political prisoners and the African liberation struggle. This free event is next Saturday, August 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So reserve your spot now by registering at tinyurl.com/freeemall2022. On September 2nd to the 4th, attend the 2022 annual NPDUM convention, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement Convention, with the theme Defending the Black Community, We Are Our Own Liberators. The convention is taking place at Aquaba Hall in St. Louis, Missouri. Register at npdum2022.eventbrite.com. Visit the new website, handsoffuhuru.org. It is a central place online where you can find information about the attacks and learn what you can do to support, including organizing an action and donating to the Legal Defense Fund. Get updates on the Hands Off campaign and read solidarity statements in media coverage. Visit handsoffuhuru.org. On November 5th and 6th, join the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparation for its 14th annual Black People's March on the White House in Washington, D.C. Register at blackisbackcoalition.org. Again, I want to emphasize it is the 14th annual Black People's March on the White House. And that is also a profound statement just regarding the counterinsurgency. So again, this is happening in Washington, D.C. Register at blackisbackcoalition.org. Everybody should find a way, organize, get to Washington, D.C. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and support the Omali Taught Me show by donating now at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. And just want to recognize Comrade Eugene on YouTube, who donated $20 in the middle of the overview discussion. So Uhuru, Eugene, thank you so much. So Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other Uhuru Movement speakers for your campus or organization now. Email info@uhurutours.com or call 727-914-3621. This is really important because we're also calling on people to do tour events in your city to bring the chairman and other party leaders around this Hands Off Uhuru campaign, Hands Off Africa campaign. So if you want to bring the dynamic presentation of Chairman Omali Yeshitela to your campus, to your organization, book now, email info@uhurutours.com. And lastly, to check out all the upcoming Uhuru movement events not mentioned today, you can visit theburningspear.com/events calendar. This is all things Uhuru movement, everything you need to know about what organization, who is doing what events you can attend and support. It will be at theburningspear.com/events calendar. So that will wrap up our announcements, and just want to reiterate that the significance of how we survive the counterinsurgency is in the people, and the fact that the people, one, that the party is based in, the community, in the African working class community, and brings people into active political life. And that requires your participation right now. This moment in history calls on you to join the revolutionary vehicle that's going to destroy the colonial mode of production and has advanced this struggle, these questions for the last 50 years. You need to be a part of that. There's no more waiting. You see this system in absolute decline, deteriorating all around you. We don't need to be on the sinking ship. We have to be on the Black Star steamship line going towards the redemption of Africa. So join the African People's Socialist Party, the revolutionary organization, the 21st century Garvey movement. Join this under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela at apspuhuru.org. The time is now, comrades, and there's no turning back. This system, the clock is ticking on imperialism, on colonial capitalism, and we have the ability, we are going to be responsible for its demise towards a liberated Africa. So be a part of that future, make that future possible by joining the African People's Socialist Party. Go to apspuhuru.org. Go ahead and submit that application today. So, comrades, we are concluding the announcement sections, and it's my honor now to introduce the leader of the African nation and world revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, to discuss how we survive the counterinsurgency. Uhuru, Chairman, welcome.
Uhuru, thank you very much, Comrade Director Akile. I want to express appreciation to everyone who is participating in this study on today. And I want to send a special shout out to those comrades who are involved in the viewing party, the group viewing of this discussion, this study in London. I know that when we began, part of what took us off our time schedule and the seamless production that you usually provide for us, Comrade Director Akile, is the fact that there was a lot of noise in the background initially where Comrade Secretary General Louise is located. But there was noise there because they were setting up in London for a group viewing, group participation in this discussion. Setting up in London because our party and our movement are busy at work in England as in various other places around the world. I also want to recognize the fact that even as we have this discussion, there is a group of us here in St. Louis who are viewing this together, probably more than just those of us who are here at the Uhuru House where I am located. Also, I know without having been told that there will be group viewing in Africa. I know in Sierra Leone that is the case, and possibly in Ghana. And I assume that in various places in what is called South Africa, similar groupings are gathering to participate in this discussion, which is one of the things that makes us problematic. We're looking now at Chapter 3 of Vanguard, the
the political report to our last Congress. And the title in Chapter 3 was How the Party Survived the Counterinsurgency. But I just want to say that, and what is obvious looking at today, looking at the fact that we've just experienced July 29th, the attack on our organization in various places within the United States, is the counterinsurgency is not over. We talk about things like COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program that was initiated with specific long-term goals that attacked us. And when I say us, I mean the African liberation movement within the United States in the 1960s in particular, where during a time that it had declared that the Black Panther Party was the greatest internal threat to the security of the United States. But it didn't just talk about the Black Panther Party. It identified various other forces, including Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael, who died with the name Kwame Ture, as others. It was a program that identified various key Black extremists, or Kibis, as we used to refer to them in the 1960s, which included me on that list. So there was a number of us. But the fundamental thing that I think is really important for us to understand is that this program, this counterinsurgency, this war, this July 29th that just occurred, exposes to us that the foundation of the entire rotten social system that we're contending with, and that everybody complains about, whether they're right-wingers, as they're characterized in the United States, the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th and was chasing the vice president through the hallways, talking about hanging him, whether they are so-called revolutionary forces who might even characterize themselves as communists, or whether they're just women tired of being dogged out and oppressed, or homosexuals tired of being criminalized and also insulted, whether they're young people, Africans on the corners in St. Louis and Houston, Texas, just trying to make it. Everybody complains about it. Everybody is opposed to it. Everybody is upset about it. You can't find any place in the world where folk are not upset about this social system. In fact, I saw a poll recently. I saw evidence of a poll in a news article that said that more than 50% of the people, the so-called voters in the United States, think the system has to be overturned. So it's a whole rotten social system that is in extreme distress. But the real thing that we should recognize, and what we've seen and talked about up to now, is that the foundation of this whole system is African colonization, colonial slavery, and the colonial domination of the peoples of the world. It is a colonial mode of production. And if a simple examination will, given the right kind of theoretical leadership, will easily show that every contradiction that this country is experiencing has a consequence, is as a consequence of the ongoing process of this country, of the old Western colonial powers attempting to maintain its status on the backs of African and other colonized peoples around the world. And we begin to learn, as we have a discussion about counterinsurgency and counterintelligence and things like that, of this entity that's called a state. It's really interesting that increasingly you are hearing this issue of the state. Now we hear it from people who are associated with Donald Trump, the former US president of the United States, who actually apparently, along with millions of white people in this country, thinks he's still the president. You see this discussion about so-called deep state. Well, the state is a state is a state. I'm not talking about how deep it is, how shallow it is. It's the state. And the state is an entity that has come into existence for the exact purpose of protecting the status quo, the existing kind of social system. If it is a social system that's based on slavery, it protects that system. It creates different kinds of entities, instruments to be able to do that. It also is reflected in the legal institutions and things like this. This is the state, the prisons, the jails, the courts, et cetera. But what we're looking at is a state that has its origin from the development of Europe, from feudalism. And during the era of feudalism, the state was a feudal state. And along with feudalism, which was where the majority of white people lived in a state of relative servitude, of near starvation, poverty, and what have you, dominated by the landowners and the nobility. During this process, the philosophy that supported that made that something that was justifiable, the legal institutions that came along with that were institutions to protect the status quo, protect the nobility, protect the royalty from the peasants and people who were living on the land that was owned by the nobility and the landlords. And at this time, the philosophy revolved around the power of the church, the Christian church, the Catholic church. And here, this whole question of the how does it go about the divine rule of the king was what permeated every assumption of legality that you saw in feudal Europe. And in fact, one of the most significant European philosophers, a man named Diderot from France, he made this famous statement as a part of the process that was fighting against feudalism, a part of the process to overturn feudalism and the divine right of the kings. This incredibly important statement he made. He said that man shall never be free until the last king has been strangled with the intestines of the last priest. And this was a statement about the divine right of kings. This was a statement about the ruling social system and the ideas that went along with it and the laws and things that went along with it. So if you have feudalism, then the laws that are there protects feudalism, protects the landlords, protects the nobility. If you have a society based on slavery, the laws protect slavery. You can imagine a law during an era of slavery that gave rights to the enslaved that were meaningful. It just doesn't happen that way. So if you have colonialism, which is something that rescued Europe from feudalism, the European peasant, the European serf was rescued from that state of oppression and exploitation from Europe stretching out. It wasn't even in Europe at that time, but white people leaving Europe and then going first to Africa from Portugal, a starving, almost non-significant entity called Portugal. Here you have forces leaving Portugal in 1415 in particular, initiating the process of capturing and enslaving Black people. And it's from here that the world economy emerged. It's from here that what has come to be known as capitalism emerged. It's from here that we saw the disappearance, if you will, of this essential fight that's happening between different tribes in what now we know as Europe, between the Celts or the Normans and all of these other tribes that are there, until we have now consolidated not just different tribes fighting and defining themselves in relationship to each other, but whoa, look at what we can do collectively, taking the gold and the niggers and all of this other stuff around the world. And this is the thing that consolidated Europe. This is the thing that gave birth to what is now called Europe. Before that, there was no Europe. It was the enslavement of African people that created what is now Europe. It is the colonial process that created what is now called Europe, that created the ideas that consolidated this entity that we now know as Europe, and also the laws. So here's a real contradiction, because even as this Europe is coming into existence, it is fighting against the whole feudal entity. It is uniting with, to some extent, with Diderot's assumption that we can't be free until we strangle the king with the guts of the priest. And so this process is disappearing, and a whole nother process is being born as a new world. And what they've characterized as a new world is one that is really coming into existence. But it is not just a world of separate, small, little fiefdoms in this territory that we now know as Europe. It's a new world
that now consolidates the group of people in these fiefdoms into a singularly identified one, gives them a sense of sameness. The sense of sameness, the consciousness of what we now know as Europe, was born through the process of enslaving Africans and colonizing Africans in the rest of the world. That's where the entire consciousness comes from. This is the birth of European consciousness. This is the birth of what they would like to refer to as capitalist philosophy, et cetera. It comes from this. Karl Marx defined this process of building capitalism. He said it had to start from some place. It couldn't just pop up. He said it was not something that's born of religion, except for the fact that he said it's turning Africa into a warring for the commercial hunting of black skins. That's how it started. And then he talked about how this process spread throughout what came to be known as Asia and the rest of that. This is where it came from. This is what Marx said. And he said further that capitalism, the working class in under capitalism, the articulation of capitalism in European society, he said that he referred to as wage slavery. He called it wage slavery to distinguish it from what was happening to us as Africans and the other peoples around the world. This is something peculiar to Europe. This is different from Europe. And he says wage slavery required as a pedestal, a platform. Slavery, he said wage slavery in Europe. That is to say, the destruction of feudalism in Europe. The movement from feudal society to capitalist society, he said wage slavery in Europe required as a pedestal slavery, pure and simple, in what they referred to as the New World. And the New World was being achieved through colonial slavery. This is the thing that locked the whole world into a single economy. So we're not looking any longer at white history, of Celtic history, of Norman history, if you will. Now what we see is world history, where the economy of the world, the peoples of the world are locked into a single economic relationship that sometimes we lose sight of because we call it Italy, or we call it Ghana, or we call it all these other places and define our economic and political relationships based on that. But it is now one world economy, resting on the oppression and exploitation of African people. And this comes with philosophical and legal instruments to maintain the status quo. And the legal instruments that we are talking about is state. And so for the first time, we see emerging not just a state a feudal state that's controlling people in some province that we now know as England, but the state which has always been there, because you have to have a state. It has been there almost since the advent of class society in Europe. Because class society identifies that exploitation exists between one sector. One sector is benefiting from exploitation of the labor and resources of another sector of society. So that's the class differences. And that requires, in order to maintain that, how you just going to be taking people's stuff? How you going to be exploiting people without having some instrument to make sure that the people you're exploiting maintain this relationship of exploitation so you can continue to benefit from it, so you can send your children off to Europe when they're 18 or however long. How are you going to keep that society there? How are you going to keep that relationship there? So you have to build instruments to make that happen. So you have to have force. You have to also have a monopoly on violence. That this entity that controls, that leads, that benefits from this relationship has to be monopoly of violence. What do I mean, a monopoly of violence? I mean, you can't have the capacity of violence coming from the enslaved. You can't have the capacity of violence coming from the colonized. You have to have a monopoly of violence. You build, this is part of what it is. And part of that means the police, the military, the courts, the jails, all of this, along with the secret political police, to maintain a monopoly of violence. And anything that violates or compromises or challenges the monopoly of violence and power and resources in the possession of the rulers of society is a crime. But here's the contradiction that Europe has been trapped with since even the emergence of Europe as an entity, because it promotes itself, it seduces itself, it's engaged all the time in self-seduction, right? It convinces itself that it is a just society, that it has created this fabulously exceptional democratic process that people can participate in. It says that now we don't have kings and queens who can arbitrarily do this to us or do that to us. The landlords or landowners can arbitrarily mistreat us. They say we now are governed by laws. And being governed by laws is what equalizes the relationship between all the people. It says that there are no kings, no queens. The classes don't really exist, but laws are what govern this relationship. This is what they said. You can look at their philosophers I have that says this is the basis of, but they had to answer the question, if this is real for us, then how do we explain what the hell we're doing to them black people in Africa, in India, all these other places where we dominate and they don't have the benefit of law? We just take them out and cut their heads off. We stick their heads on pikes so that everybody who wants to get out of the place, who challenged the status quo, recognize that this is what we'll do to you. We shoot you down in broad daylight on Canfield Drive in Ferguson. These are examples that we say, how are you going to do that? How are you going to be killing black people on a regular basis, as they do? Sometimes televised, sometimes seen by millions of people like George Floyd. How the hell are you going to do that? At the same time, you said, this is a system of laws. There's no oppression, no exploitation. And so what happens is they come up with a legal exceptionalism. And this is built into the whole theory and philosophy of the emergence of European democracy. And this legal exceptionalism is based on the assumption that the relationship that the colonizer has to those of us who are colonized is a civilizing process, that they are engaged in a civilizing mission. This is what the white man's burden is all about. This is one of the great poets, Rudyard Kipling from England, came up with. It's the white man's burden. I say he came up with, he didn't come up with it. This is basically built into the philosophy of colonialism, justifying what they do to us, justifying what they do to oppressed and colonized peoples all around the world. It's the white man's burden. This is the exception. The exception is that because the white man has the responsibility of bringing the rest of us up to the level of civilization that has already been acquired by white folks, by the colonizers, you see? And so to do that, it's permissible to do anything necessary to make us human, which is to say, to make us white or white-like, to make us like the colonizer. They can do that. And that's why they come up with designer laws that you see every day in this country. They say the law says such and such a thing, but but except for, even the 13th Amendment says that slavery is supposed to be over in the United States Constitution. Slavery is over except for punishment of a crime. Okay, so now you out of jail, you out of formal legal slavery, and then they create another legal slavery for you in the sense of jails and prisons, which is why in this country, the 1 out of every 8 human beings on earth who's in prison in the world is an African in America, except for they're walking in the middle of the street in Canfield Drive and the cop shows up, except for they throw you down and put a knee on your neck And actually, it wasn't the knee on your neck that killed him, it was the exhaust fumes that coming out of the car while the knee was on the neck. This is the ridiculous kinds of stuff that they trap people in, but it's legal. When they finally captured Nat Turner, whose crime was, he organized, he was a preacher. But he didn't preach the divine right of kings. He preached to the Africans who were enslaved. Strike at night and spare no one. And they finally captured Nat Turner. And of course, what they did to Nat Turner was they took him to trial. Here's an enslaved person whose crime is breaking out of slavery. They put him on trial. And then they hanged him as a consequence of breaking the law. That's what he did. He broke the law. Here is John Brown. He's a white guy who united with the struggle of liberating African people from enslavement. They captured him and put him on trial. And then they found him guilty and they killed him as a consequence of that. Here is the African People's Socialist Party that's involved in the struggle for the liberation of Black people, the unification of Africa, liberation of African people around the world. This is a social system they've established that provides wealth and resources and dignity and everything that one could have at the expense of Africa and the oppressed peoples around the world. Here it is. And we are free except for if we tell everybody that we are oppressed. If we go out and tell the world we are oppressed. If we tell the world we are oppressed, somebody told us to do it. It's not because we are oppressed, because we're working for somebody else. It's not because I grew up in an era where nigger knocking was the national pastime, where a white person gets bored, doesn't have an event for sex life, say, let's go out and kill a Black person, kill a nigger, knock a nigger. This is the America that I grew up in. Nobody had to tell me that. I'm going to stop. But this is what we're looking at. So I know we're supposed to be talking about chapter 3, but we are. We are. And I advise everybody to take a look at chapter 3, because we are still talking about surviving the counterinsurgency. But this discussion about surviving the counterinsurgency is about negating the capacity of the colonial state, the relevance of the colonial state, the existence of the colonial state, which is something that has negated our freedom, our dignity, our capacity to develop resources for ourselves, a future for ourselves. This is what this discussion is about. We talk about counterinsurgency from the perspective of the African People's Socialist Party. We're talking about building a new world, free from the colonial state intervention that has resulted in this attack on my home in the poorest section of North St. Louis. My office in the poorest section of South St. Petersburg. And my John Brown on Gravois and their homes in South St. Louis. This is what it is that we are looking at. We intend to negate their presence. I want to finally say this. I saw something just the other day that helps us to understand what has been said about Africa being one of the targets that this system, in particular the United States, but not just the United States, has identified as having to be contained. We talked about Russia. I don't have to talk about Russia. The United States government talks about Russia. When it was battering rams in South St. Louis, it was talking about Russia. When it was throwing flashbang grenades in the back stairwell of my home, they were talking about Russia. When they sent a drone into my home that almost hit my wife in the head, they were talking about Russia. So I don't have to mention Russia, you know that. You know how now more and more they're talking about China. You can't pick up a newspaper, you can't go to any kind of media outlet and not see an attack on Russia, attack on China.
Every day, that's what you see. That's happening. And this thing that's happening with Africa is really, really should be pronounced for everybody. The first time in the 246-year history of the United States Marine, they got a black man and gave him a 4-star to make him a 4-star general and put him over African command that has the responsibility of containing, controlling Africa, black people in Africa, and also to contend with what they see as the growing influence of Russia and China in Africa. You see in the United States, at the same time, this Gregory Meeks, who is a black US congressperson who has had a law passed in the US in the House of Representatives, hasn't yet been passed in the Senate, but it will be, that says the United States should punish all of Africa that has refused to go along with its definition and its unity in the war against Russia, and the so-called diaspora, which means us. Black man did that. And then you see this same Meeks was just on an airplane a couple of weeks ago with Nancy Pelosi, who was running for her life, skirts up, trying to escape a mob of white people who were talking about killing her and the vice president of the United States. And they are in Taiwan, which is a province of China that was captured as a part of the struggle to maintain colonial domination of Asia and of China. And so Meeks is with Pelosi as our house is being attacked in St. Louis, as black people are catching hell in New York. This Negro from the New York congressperson is with Nancy Pelosi trying to create a provocation or provoke China. And then you have the situation where the so-called Secretary of Defense of the United States, Secretary of War would be a better characterization of it, Lloyd Austin, first time in history, a black man over all the military forces. Africa is a target. And that's why we were targeted, because of our relationship pulling the whole African world together. There's no other force in the world that's doing this, pulling the whole African world together in a revolutionary posture. But around the same time we're seeing this happen, you can check it out, Google it. You see the illegitimate white nationalist settler state of Israel attacks 7 offices of the Palestinian movement. These are Palestinians trying to take back their own land. They ain't even trying to do that. They're just trying to maintain a life under this white nationalist settler entity that has stolen their land, renamed themselves. They used to be a so-called Americans. They used to be Russians. They used to be all these other things, renamed it, renamed themselves, right? Stole their land. And so the people's resistance is something they cannot tolerate. It's illegal for people who are oppressed and killed by the colonizer to try to do anything to escape colonialism. It's illegal. They made the damn law that says you cannot escape us. You cannot even talk about escaping us. If you talk about it, then it's some problem, not because we did anything, but somebody told you to say this about us, right? And so this is what happened. They attacked 7 offices. If you Google that, you'll see it. You'll see the videos. You'll see them. It looks just like what you saw happen right here in St. Louis. What you saw happen right there in St. Petersburg, Florida. Same thing. And then you got Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, who's in West Africa. Did you know that, first of all, France is nothing but at best, a second-rate lick spittle in terms of a power, in terms of a country that built itself on stealing blood in black people in Haiti and much of the other world in the Caribbean and in Africa. If France didn't have this, wouldn't be no France. Wouldn't be no France. Everything they do, what they eat, how they cook, everything that's characterized as French culture stolen from Africa. And so here Macron is in Cameroon, standing before thousands of Black people, Africans. By the way, Cameroon itself has achieved its name as a consequence of Portuguese colonialism. The name is a derivative of the Portuguese word for shrimp, right? And so here Macron, this is an audacious white man, standing up saying that the reason African people are finding resentful of France and the colonizer is because of Russia. Said Russia told y'all to say this. Russia intervention is responsible. You can get this, by the way, you can Google this. So Russian intervention is the reason that we're seeing more and more opposition to France and to the colonial powers in Africa. But he wasn't talking to just some neo-colonial puppets all together. There were masses of Black people who were there who stood up and said, no, we don't need Russians to tell us what you have done, France. The fact that you, France, control the economy of 14 different so-called free countries in Africa. You, France, steal 65% of the reserves that come from so-called French Africa. And then not only do you steal it, you don't even tell us how much you got. And you've been doing this for a long period of time. And then you charge us money for putting it in your bank that we didn't want it in the first place. And then we are supposed to live off the leftovers. This is what you see happening in France. And so when you see the same line, Black people are not oppressed. It's Russians who told you that you were oppressed. You don't have a real experience with hunkyism in France. It's Russia who told you that you were oppressed. So we have an entirely different opinion of that. And so anyway, this is what this whole counterinsurgency is about. It's their fight for their lives. And I think it's really important for us to understand that, one, and two, in order to deal with this, it's not good enough just to fight against the counterinsurgency as it relates to what the FBI has done. You got to fight that, because you got to try to stay above water to wage this struggle. You got to keep yourselves alive to make this struggle. You got to fight that, but that ain't the critical question. The critical question is revolutionary organization, revolutionary science. It's the vanguard that will provide the leadership for the whole people, because the problem that they have is that, generally speaking, they can get away with oppressing the masses of people. They can destroy the leadership of the masses of people. They can negate the leadership of the masses of people. If there's no advanced force that exists in every society, there's the advanced sector of that society. Every society. It's not just Black people, but white people don't just do things like that. There's an advanced sector of the white population that helps to inform it, organize it, steps out front and represent white power. And now the mass of African people don't usually have an opportunity to have that advanced sector, because they assassinate, murder, jail, everything, that advanced sector. And so as long as that advanced sector is not there, the whole population falls victim. That's where you get Jim Crow. That's where you get this thing, that apartheid and all this other stuff, keep the whole people down all the time. Laws that affect the ability of the whole people, every Black person to move. That's what happens. But then when there emerges this force from the oppressed that takes the leadership and tries to organize and define the reality to move everything forward, then what you will find is that the ruling class has to target this sector, this factor, this thing, this force, because it's that advanced sector that stands between the oppressor and the oppressed. It's that advanced sector that stands between the masses of Black people who are being crushed, humiliated, starved, brutalized on a regular basis. That advanced sector, get that advanced sector, crush, break the head off the spear. That's what it is that they're trying to do. That's why we're having this discussion today. And I appreciate it. I know I've violated every rule that has to do with time, et cetera. And I really didn't come here with that intent. It's a spontaneous indiscipline, if you will. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, well, I can't say we're getting any complaints about this, and just really want to salute just your deepening around this question, and appreciate you raising this in terms of not just, fighting the counterinsurgency, based on this attack, just this just one attack, as if it's like removed from a whole historic process where African and colonized people are struggling to be free and struggling to tear that system down. And, the US government and imperialist forces throughout the world have historically gone to attempt to crush any semblance of revolutionary motion ever. And the African People's Socialist Party in this era, this period that we're in, is certainly different from any period in the past, just based on the questions that you have resolved with the theory of African internationalism and the development of the African People's Socialist Party. So just really want to appreciate this discussion, and we are going into that Q&A period. And so if you have not put your questions in the chat, please do so that we can get to them. We have just a little bit of time remaining here to deal with those questions. So please utilize the chat feature to drop your questions in the chat, and our moderators will get that over to me so we can raise that to the chairman. And I want to also recognize where people are tuning in from. We have Wichita, Kansas, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Brooklyn, New York, Oakland, California, Fargo, North Dakota, Bermuda, New Jersey, Montreal, Canada, Jacksonville, Florida, Portland, Oregon, San Diego, California, Boston, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, St. Petersburg, Florida, Moorhead, Minnesota, Ecuador, Houston, Texas, Illinois, Grenada, West Indies, Fort Myers, Florida, Hempstead, New York, Greenville, South Carolina, Lungi, Sierra Leone, Baltimore, Maryland, Jamaica, Marion County, Georgia, Orlando, Florida, occupied Azania or South Africa, Bronx, New York, London, Richmond, Virginia, Queens, New York, Ghana, Kenya, and Augusta, Georgia, all checked in with us today. So Uhuru comrades from around the world, thank you so much for participating in this study. So Chairman and Secretary General Loaizi, I know that you are involved in this event on the ground. So I don't know if you are able to participate in the Q&A, but if you are, please feel free to jump into this process. But the first question came earlier, towards earlier in the program, and this is from Comrade Imco in Ilihi, and they stated, the indigenous government believes in indigenous rule for our continent, occupied North and South America. Is this something the African People's Socialist Party, he says compatible or not, but I took that to mean, is this something that the African People's Socialist Party unites with? So Chairman, this is from IMCO on Facebook.
Yeah, this is something that we've fought for forever. We also recognize that while African people are struggling for the total liberation, unification of African and African people worldwide, we are also a part of the revolution of the Americas. We unite with the understanding that the indigenous peoples, people of the Americas suffer the consequence of genocide and the theft of land and resources, and that the real meaningful liberation of the indigenous peoples here is the recapture of your land, And our struggle for Africa and African people, much of it will occur on your land. And we are conscious of that. But we unite with the idea. I'm now in a place called St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis takes its name from the King Louis of France. And King Louis of France is someone that was really important to French people. And the fact is that the Haitian Revolution broke the back of France's ability to hold on to much of the territory that it characterizes as its own. It had made it a part of France. That includes almost half of what is now known as America. And as a consequence of the victory of our revolution in Haiti, it became necessary for, and we defeated Napoleon's best troops in Haiti. And of course, as you know, by which time they had killed most of the indigenous people there. And what is now known as Haiti achieved this modern iteration as a consequence of the success of the revolution of Black people. That's what kept the name Haiti alive. The revolution of African people there kept the name Haiti alive for the indigenous people, there. And Thomas Jefferson, the great American hero who was a pedophile, among other things. And that's not even the worst thing to call him. I mean, I just know children are here and they may be broadcasting on FM radio stations, so I'm not going to call Jefferson all the things that he could and should be called. But he took advantage of the defeat of France and purchased the so-called Louisiana territories and all the indigenous people in it for $15 million. That's how that came into being. And I'm making the point. It was the struggle of the indigenous and African people that's always been critical to the development of what we now are confronted with in the whole world. And that's true in the Americas, what is characterized as the Americas as well. So we, without hesitation, acknowledge that the indigenous peoples here suffer essentially as a consequence of the genocide and the theft of your land and resources, and that is absolutely necessary to be made whole again through recapturing your land and resources, and that we see ourselves as a part of that revolutionary project. I've over-talked it, but that's effectively what I want to say. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And thank you to Comrade Imko for your question. And I want to recognize another donation that came in from Mukum Tagara. I apologize if I butchered that, on YouTube. Thank you so much for your contribution. I also want to recognize people who have checked in from Tunisia, Gainesville, Florida, Botswana, Battle Creek, Michigan. And I think I forgot to say Chicago, because there are people in the chat saying Chicago is here and they are letting me know. So Uhuru comrades, thank you for tuning in. And Chairman, our next question comes from Frida on YouTube. Frida asked, was the Black Panther Party correct in its post-1971 split to move along clearly reformist, less threatening lines in order to survive during COINTELPRO? And should the African nation accept this retreat?
Yeah, I've seen somebody say no retreat, but it's possible to make a strategic retreat. The problem, of course, with that the Black Panther Party had, a different theoretical basis and foundation in terms of how it understood something. It was a really critical movement, critical party, and can clearly be characterized as the center, the revolutionary center in this country, and in some ways around the world at a particular time in its history. And you conflated the split, and I think you may have characterized the reformist trajectory, but what you see the African People's Socialist Party has done, we don't say reform is bad. We say reformism is bad. We do engage in struggle for reform, but the struggle for reform, we have developed an ability now to wage the struggle for reform under the leadership of the revolution, so that reform is not an end unto itself. That's why there is something called the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, the struggle for democracy that's locked up all kinds of forces in an anti-colonial struggle. for reform. The anti-colonial struggle for reform takes us clearly on a revolutionary trajectory. So everybody who comes into International People's Democratic Rule Movement is not a revolutionary, but they're involved in a revolutionary party. The African People's Socialist Party is a revolutionary organization that strives to lead everything. All the struggles that revolve around the reform has to be connected to what end? The end is connected to has to be revolution. And so the African People's Socialist Party represents the first time in history that the African working class has its own revolutionary party that's capable of fighting on various fronts at the same time or at different times. And so that's about what I can say. And that's not to understate or undermine the significance of the Black Panther Party. Some people may know that, that's not to undermine the significance of the Black Panther Party at all. It played a critical role. We had differences with the Black Panther Party, philosophically and what have you, but we always recognized that Black Panther Party was the Advanced Detachment, the Vanguard at that era, that time. And so did the federal government, which is one of the reasons they waged such a ferocious war against the Black Panther Party. And I want to make that clear because there are some people who would say that the Black Panther Party no longer exists because they made this era, that era, that era. The Black Panther Party doesn't exist because the United States government waged a ferocious war. The same government that's making war against peoples around the world, Venezuela, all made a war against Black people in the form of the Black Panther Party, declared the Black Panther Party the greatest internal threat to the security of the United States. And now there are a lot of post-Black Panthers and post-revolutionary Black Panthers. Everybody can love the Black Panther Party now, but they didn't love it when they were shooting in the bedrooms of Fred Hampton on December 4th, 1969. So I'm not on that trajectory of the Black Panther Party made this era and that's why they no longer exist. They no longer exist because they had to fight almost alone. They did make certain kinds of retreat, but the retreat that I'm talking about is not reformism. The retreat was when the white left in particular required it to define a certain critical moment in the history of our resistance as a struggle against fascism, when it was always a struggle against colonialism. But the white left demanded that we define our struggle in a way that facilitates the advancing their own interests in the contest with other sectors of the colonial forces, et cetera, not against colonialism. And I don't, I know I haven't stated that as clearly as it could be stated, but that's the time where I felt like it was a real error that was made, and not an error, but the fact is it was isolated. And the white left, in order to get the support of the white left while Fred was being murdered, Panthers murdered all around the country, then they had to say, okay, fascism, let's fight against the fascism that white people recognize as a problem.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And that was from Comrade Frida on YouTube. Thank you, Frida, for your question. Want to recognize another donation that's come in from Comrade EL on YouTube with $50. So Uhuru, thank you so much, EL, for donating today. And we're going to keep the questions going because we're getting lots of them in. This comes from Comrade Omali Mbasani on Facebook. He says, do you think that the FBI is going to come back again, or was this just to scare us?
I like your name. No, it wasn't just to frighten us. It was to frighten us, but not just to frighten us. It was also to frighten you, sort of frighten other people, saying that this is what can happen to you if you fight for freedom. Just like leaving Mike Brown on 100-degree plus asphalt in 2014 for 4.5 hours, so that all the people could see it and experience that, was to say, this is what would happen to you should you ever stand up. So I think that there's a great likelihood of indictments, and that's the minimum thing. And I don't take lightly the statement that they were making to me when I came out of my house on the morning of July 29th. And that was even as flashbang grenades were going off and what have you, those laser dots on my chest coming from automatic weapons. I don't take that lightly. So, and I don't take lightly Fred Hampton and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and all of the other people that they've murdered. I don't take that lightly. I know their capacity and I know their willingness to do anything to stay in power. They're threatening the world with nuclear destruction, even as we are having this discussion right now. So Comrade Omali, it's not over. And if it's not the FBI, some other iteration of the FBI. And I think that they might not come in the same way. I have some ideas about how attacks will be made in the future, but it's not over. They have stolen tons and tons and tons of documents. They got my medical records. I mean, if you look at it, they have my medical records. They have all kinds of texts and communiques. And I use the medical records thing as a kind of, I think a startling kind of example to say just how extensive the materials that they've stolen from us. So they can construct and will construct anything that they want to. They will do, how do they call it now? This thing that they will construct whatever they want to construct. And so they have conversations that can mean anything, that they will make mean anything that they want them to mean. That's just the truth. And right now, they're talking about Russia. But they can take conversations I have with comrades in Ireland. Because we supported the Irish. They can take discussions I have with comrades in Nicaragua. They can take the discussion I had with the former president of Namibia. When we locked down and talk about how they were stealing out, even after independence, stealing the resources underground of Namibia. They can take anything they want to, construct anything they want, and they will do that. So, Comrade Omali, I do expect to see more and hear more from them. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, and thank you, Comrade Omali, for your question, and want to also put forward the handsoffuhuru.org and the whole Defense Committee campaign that we just launched, and that, if you want to become a part of that, support that, donate to that, to visit handsoffuhuru.org, to email us at info@handsoffuhuru.org, to join the Defense Committee, whether you have any experience or relationship to, lawyers, the legal question, or just the political front, joining this campaign, this international campaign, you should become a part of this because, as Chairman says, we anticipate these attacks coming either from the FBI, but definitely from the U.S. government, the imperialist forces who are fighting to maintain power. We anticipate those kinds of attacks, but what we have to be is making this struggle, this anti-colonial struggle, building it all throughout the world, and make it known that when they attack the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, they have attacked Africa, and the U.S. government is making a clear statement that Africa is a central question to them, and it's a bone in their throat, as the chairman has said about other forces in the world. So make sure to go to handsoffuhuru.org, join this defense committee, and donate as well.
May I say,
yes, Chairman.
One other thing that's really important is, and this is responding to the question by Comrade Omali, is we cannot allow what they have just done to deter this movement, which is one of the reasons I refuse to discuss this, and just something that's happened to me, to my wife, to the different offices of the Uhuru movement. The fact is that they've had a strategy for long periods of time. Kill the head and the body would die. And we've built, I think, a magnificent organization, and it's global. And your responsibility, everybody, is to make sure that no matter what happens to me or the individuals who have been targeted, or even the specific iterations of our party and movement, you got to join this movement, join this party. This is the thing that makes sure that it doesn't die. you know, a long time ago, I used to go to events and I'd speak, and somebody inevitably would raise the question of whether or not the party or the movement would be able to survive me. What would happen if you were assassinated, as so many people are assassinated? And the person asking the question is the answer to the question. You have to happen. You have to happen now. So many people are getting in touch with her as this moment, as a consequence of the attack by the FBI. And so many of them are saying that I can't stand on the sidelines any longer. That's what they're saying in the comments that they're sending to us in terms of wanting to join the party and the movement. And that's the right response to have. We've created a credible organization. It's advanced, led by advanced revolutionary theory, advanced revolutionary party. You have to come on board. That's the response. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, that is so powerful, profound. You are the response, as people are asking that question. I just really appreciate that. And people can go to apspuhuru.org to join, to get up off the sidelines and join this movement. So, Chairman, we are down to the wire here. I'm going to take this question from Plum Jade on YouTube, who asks, what will African leaders gain from participating in Biden's call for the upcoming U.S.-Africa summit in December?
In addition to the possibility of contracting COVID, they will certainly gain bad reputations because all Africa is rising up. They're rising up in Cameroon. They're rising up in what they call South Africa. They're rising up in Sierra Leone, and they're rising up in St. Louis and St. Petersburg, Florida. All Africans are rising up. So they get a bad reputation, and they might get COVID. And if they get COVID, they're probably going to be stuck with the traditional responses to COVID that you'll find in the United States, where they throw you in a bed and stick a tube down your throat and likely, bring about your early demise. That's all that any of the African leaders can expect to get from this meeting with Biden. So there's nothing there, and more African leaders, as they're characterized, are refusing to fall into that trap. And the intervention that bothers them so much about Russia and China is that even African neo-colonialists feel like they can find better patrons, that the US they see is a declining power, but they see Russia and China as rising power. So if I'm going to be a sellout, it's better to be a sellout on the side of Russia and China than to be a sellout on the side of the United States. Of course, I'm not saying that the leaders who refuse to cooperate with Biden are sellouts, but I'm saying that people, even sellouts, have an option now that they didn't have a little while ago. So there's nothing to be gained from that. I'm sure. I'm certainly they're going to lose my friendship. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, and I definitely can say that, this meeting that Biden is trying to have, it's all a part of the desperate scramble. And as you laid out with the installation of these neo-colonial puppets over these very strategic positions at this moment in history, it's all the last ditch effort by this social system to try to pull it all back together. But as their own ruling class has articulated, that this decline with the U.S. imperialist power is not cyclical, it is permanent. And I think that's one of my favorite things that I've read this year. So Chairman, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping it up here. And I don't know if we can get Eshi Loezi back on to even make to help do some closing remarks. If not, Chairman, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you for closing. But Eshi Loezi, are you able to join us briefly, or is this event got you wrapped up? All right, so I'll go ahead and assume that means that it's on and popping right there in London. Oh, there you go.
Yes, well, I can. I'm there. Yeah, it was, as usual, extraordinary just to be part of this panel with the chairman. Only thing I can say to all Africans who are listening, It's like when you're reading a book about the 60s. You say, I wish I was there when Lumumba was there. You wish you were there when Nkrumah was there. Now you can say, you wish you are with the African People's Socialist Party. The history is being made now. What's going to happen to our people in the next, 50, 100 years? It's going to be determined in the next, this year, next year, in the next 3 years. So Africans are at a critical place in history. We're going to make a decision. Are we going to be just assistants, spectators, or are we going to be active participants to change the world so that our children and children can have a future? That's basically what this study is about. If you're listening, you have to take a decision that our future is in our own hands, and you're going to be part of it. Europe cannot rule the world, as you know, in the same old way. US cannot rule the world as in the old same way. That's clear to everybody, from Palestine to Afghanistan, everybody's clear. So we want you also to be clear. And what's missing is the will of black people from the planet to say enough is enough. Africa has to become a world power. With your active participation and unity, we have to unite everywhere. It has to become so easy that if you are against Africa, if you're against the unification of black people, then you are with the colonizers. You're making wars, not against the colonizers, but you're making war on the black people, on the black masses, then you are with the colonizers. That's where we are. I'm asking you to join today so we can speed up history and be free again, as we used to be since the creation of humanity. So history is upon us. Let's seize it. Join today. Join now. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Secretary General Lawezi, and Uhuru to the comrades on the ground there. I want to salute you and thank you so much for your participation. And Chairman, before I pass it over to you for closing remarks, I want to recognize Comrade Matum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who donated $25 to Omali Taught Me today. So Uhuru, Comrade Matum, thank you for your contribution. And I also saw a pledge for $20 from, let me get this name. Excuse me, one second. Comrade, let me get it. It's somewhere up here. K. Rashad Bey said $20. I made a pledge for $20 today as well. So just wanted to make sure I acknowledge that as well. Thank you so much for everybody who contributed, commented, made a question, and attended today. Chairman, please, can you give us some closing remarks?
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to say that this July 29th attack on my home, my life, my wife's life, the party and Uhuru movement will not allow the U.S. to escape the scrutiny of the world, which is part of what it is intended to do. The world is scrutinizing you. The world is scrutinizing the relationship we have with colonialism and the fact that we are involved in escaping from a colonial mode of production. That's not going to be halted by July 29th. The other thing I do want to say is remind people that on September 2nd through the 4th, right here in St. Louis, an incredibly significant convention of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement will be happening. And it is under one theme is we are our own liberators. This was something that had been determined prior to this claim that somehow the Russians are telling us what to do. In fact, it is a slogan that came from ZANU in Zimbabwe many years ago in the struggle against the government of Rhodesia. In this instance, Black people wanted to separate from Rhodesia, which was an illegitimate entity that was created exactly for the purpose of enslaving and stealing all kinds of resources. We are our own liberators. That's going to be September 2nd through the 4th. People should participate in that. everybody who can should come to St. Louis. This is an invitation I want to continue to hold out to everybody, because there's a way that we are being attacked that will leave some people with an assumption that we are some kind of entity that's under the ground or slinking around, that frightening you as a servant of some other entity. The truth is, come and see for yourself. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe what's being said about us. Come and see for yourself. And September 2nd through the 4th, come to St. Louis. Register for the convention, whether you can come or not. I wish you would come, but if you can't come, at least register for the convention. And I think that there's some information that you can be put in the chat about how to do that, how to register. The other thing I want to mention to everybody, and this is critical, is on November 5th and 6th, the Black is Back coalition that the African People's Socialist Party played a primary role in creating will be having its 14th annual March on the White House, Black People's March on the White House. And it's going to happen on the 5th, is a rally and march in Malcolm X Park. And then on the 6th, there's going to be a conference. And it's going to be with a theme that includes hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa. It's really important for everybody who suggests opposition to what has happened to us. And there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of communiques indicating that they oppose to what happened to us, to this attack that we saw. We need this extraordinary explosion of a demonstrative explosion of support for the right of African people, for the right of the African People's Socialist Party to advocate and organize for the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people globally. That's why they attacked us. So I'm hoping to see everybody. You can get more information on this. You can register for participation by going to blackisbackcoalition.org. Blackisbackcoalition.org. Join the party, join the revolution, participate in these incredibly significant events that I've just mentioned. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. And as mentioned, you can find those links in the chat section to the PDUM convention to register, and as well for the Black is Back mobilization in Washington, DC. So this is going to wrap up the Omali Taught Me Sunday study. This week, want to appreciate and salute the brilliant leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and send a huge thank you to all of you tuning in. Appreciate Secretary General Louise Kinshasa for being with us this morning. Also want to appreciate the Omali Taught Me Show team that pulls the whole thing together, all of the production, the AV, the chat moderators, all of you forces. Really want to salute and appreciate you as well in the production of this show. Want to encourage people to follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday study. Bring the chairman to your city, your campus, or organization, and donate to the Defense Committee. We say hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, relentless, and Vanguard up. Uhuru, comrades, thank you so much. Uhuru.